A 3-day-old foal, left behind in the middle of a wolf pack. No one ran to save it. No one even screamed. There was only him, collapsed in the freezing mud, as sharp jaws slowly closed in. Except for one woman, who had already lost everything. Empty hands, hollow heart, and a past far crueler than the beasts that circled her. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the growl. The wolves didn't bite. They didn't run. They stood and escorted her, not to safety, but to where the truth had been buried. You think this is just another rescue story? Wrong. This is a confession told without a single word. A pact between the wild and a woman who had once abandoned herself. Because when you reach the final moment, you'll understand. Some wounds don't bleed, but still make the forest bow. No one wanted to enter Shale Ridge this time of year. Not humans. Not birds. And it seemed not even light dared touch the ground here. This wasn't a valley. It was a fracture between two worlds, where life, the moment it exhaled, was buried under ice and fire. A place where nature didn't need to scream to kill, it only had to stay silent long enough for everything inside you to come undone. That morning, the fog was as thick as smoke. But beneath the ground, the smoke was rising like mist. From the south, flames crept forward like red claws. From the north, the freeze tightened its grip, sealing off entire stretches of forest, silencing the whinnies of wild souls before they could even cry out. In the middle, there was no escape. A herd of mustangs slipped quietly into a rocky gorge. Not because they chose it, but because there was nowhere else left to go. Leading them was Bran, an aging black stallion, with an ashen gray mane and eyes that had once watched his herd be torn apart by man. He didn't cry out, didn't flinch. He just bowed his head and kept walking, as if he knew that survival wasn't ahead, but in every step that hadn't collapsed yet. Beside him was Lyra, a mare scarred down her flank from a winter long past, one where she had stood unflinching before a pack of wolves. And beneath her belly, Orin, her firstborn son, only 3 days into life. Orin was born into a cloud of ash. When his first cry echoed, all he could smell was scorched bark and the howl of wind calling from a place no soul returns from. He had never seen a meadow. Never heard running water. All he knew was cold rock, trembling earth, and shadows that stretched like nightmares across the valley. Bran paused atop a high stone ledge and inhaled deeply. The air reeked of burnt bone. Wind slid through canyon cracks with the brittle sound of something breaking, as if it were snapping spirits one by one. He turned and stared into the dust cloud behind them. No other horses could keep pace. Bran struck the rock with his hoof, once, twice, 3 times. A cold, sharp rhythm that rang like a ritual long forgotten. The others caught up and fell into stillness. No one cried. No hooves stomped. They all understood. This was where others had walked and never returned. To the east, the sky turned the color of scorched bronze. In the distance, slender black figures slipped through the trees, fast, silent, precise. Bran saw them. He didn't move. Lyra pulled Orin close to her side. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with something deeper, a script she'd seen too many times in dreams that never ended well. Orin began to tremble. Not from the cold. Not from exhaustion. But because for the first time, he realized the world had no place for him. The sky was burning. The ground was splitting. The sounds behind them had vanished. And even his mother's eyes, though gentle, were beginning to dim with sorrow. Bran released a short, sharp call, the order to move. The herd crossed a dry creek bed, hoofs clanging against stone like funeral drums. Oren tried to follow, his long legs clumsy on the gravel. He stumbled. Lyra stopped, nudged him upright with her muzzle. The wind curled upward. Ash scattered like the broken memories of spirits that had once passed this way. Then Bran froze. A sound, faint, thin, like breath drawn through stone. And then, a silhouette. It didn't run. Didn't howl. It just stood there. Tall. Gaunt. Pale as mist, but with amber eyes that didn't belong in any dream. Lyra stepped back. Oren fell again. Bran didn't signal. He stood still as a monument. And so did the creature across from him. They stared, a horse that had once lost a herd, and a being that had never belonged to one. The wind died. No birds. No insects. Only the sound of heartbeats, and the earth beneath their hooves beginning to crack. Then from behind the rock face, a second shadow appeared. Then a third. They were surrounding them. No sound. No wasted gaze. Bran turned and let out a sharper whinny, urgent. Lyra snapped into motion, yanking Oren to his feet. The foal stumbled, eyes blurring in the smoke. Behind them, hoofs thundered in chaos. Ahead, just forest. And breaths that didn't belong to him. Oren slipped. Fell. His mother was swept away in the stampede. No one looked back. No one had time. Oren tried to rise, back legs dragging like melting ice. He screamed. No answer came. And that was when the wolves stepped out. The foal lay trembling in the clearing, surrounded by shadow and silence. Above, on a jagged cliff overlooking the chaos, someone was watching, someone who had long stopped believing she could feel anything at all. 5 years. That's how long she had been gone. Sylvie Thorne hadn't spoken to a human in over 1,700 days. No visitors. No calls. Just a voice recorder full of unfinished thoughts, and wolves, always the wolves. Once hailed as a rising star at the University of Vermont's biology department, Sylvie had vanished after a field incident that claimed a child's life. People speculated. They whispered in hallways, wrote careful footnotes in papers she once peer-reviewed. Some said it was a colleague's son. Others claimed it was her own. She never corrected anyone. What was there to correct? There are some truths you bury so deep, you start to forget where the grave lies. Now, Sylvie lived alone in a modest cabin carved into the edge of Shale Ridge, surrounded by silence, shadows, and one of the most elusive wolf packs in the region, the Shadowmoor Pack. 13 wolves. And among them, Ira. A white she-wolf with amber eyes, born in captivity, scarred by man, but returned to the wild in a desperate act of redemption from another time, another system. Unlike the others, Ira watched. Ira remembered. And sometimes, Ira came too close to the edge of human things. Sylvie was fascinated by her. Not as a researcher anymore. Not entirely. But as a ghost looking at another ghost, each wearing fur or flesh, but never truly alive. That morning, Sylvie had risen before the cold had lifted. She tracked the Shadowmoor Pack to the southern ridgeline, navigating through blackened branches and soil still warm from fire. The trees stood like the charred ribs of something that had once breathed. She carried only essentials, her binoculars, her voice recorder, and a notebook she hadn't written in for months. Reaching a cliffside overlook, she paused, crouched low behind a wall of stone. The elevation gave her an uninterrupted view of the basin below. And there they came. Horses. Wild mustangs. Moving like phantoms between smoke and frost. A black stallion led them, scarred, ancient in posture, followed by a limping mare and a foal. Newborn. Unsteady. Marked by a white star that glinted even through ash. Sylvie lowered her binoculars. Her pulse spiked. Something about the foal. No, not something. Everything. Its wobbling legs. Its flickering eyes. The way it clung to its mother, then lost her. Below, chaos erupted. The wolves had spread out. She recognized the formation, flanking, driving, pressing. Bran, the stallion, whinnied, but it came too late. The band fractured. Dust rose. And then, the foal went down. Alone. Trembling. In the open clearing where shadow had more presence than light. Through the lens, Sylvie watched it crawl, legs splaying out awkwardly. Its cries were sharp, desperate, not a whinny, not yet, more like a question it didn't understand. She could hear it without the glass. And suddenly, she wasn't crouching behind stone anymore. She was there. Again. At the edge of a lake. A different child. A different species. But the sound, the same. The sound of something dying in front of you. Something you were supposed to protect. Sylvie's breath hitched. She clenched the binoculars so tightly her knuckles blenched. Below, the wolves circled. Ira was among them, her snowy coat cutting clean through the charcoal hues. But her posture wasn't right. The others stalked low. Ira stood tall. Sylvie saw it instantly, the tension in her spine, the ears drawn forward, not back. Curiosity. Not hunger. Then something shifted, deep inside Sylvie, not in the clearing. That part of her that had been still for years, stirred. It whispered, "You can't watch this." Another voice snapped back, "You're not here to save. Only to observe." She stood. The wind caught her coat as she took a step back. But her feet didn't obey. Below, the foal collapsed again. And Sylvie stayed frozen. She didn't move. Didn't shout. Didn't descend the slope. Not yet. Her breath caught in her throat, her eyes locked on the white wolf at the edge. Ira hadn't moved either. Two beings, one human, one not, staring across a chasm that neither of them fully understood. The clearing held its breath. The trees didn't creak. The wind didn't sigh. And somewhere beneath Sylvie's ribs, the old ache stirred again, but this time, she didn't look away. Not yet. Not again. And far below, the wolves did not howl. She didn't remember moving. One moment, Sylvie was standing on the cliff, frozen. The next, her feet were sliding, stumbling, careening down loose shale and dry brush, her heart pounding louder than the wind. This wasn't science. This wasn't reason. This was something raw, older than instinct, deeper than guilt. The foal lay just ahead, crumpled like breathless parchment. The wolves watched. And then, the woman entered the clearing. She didn't scream. Didn't raise her arms. She walked, breath shallow, eyes locked on the small body. The wolf stirred. A growl rippled through the tree line. The alpha stepped forward. A massive gray wolf, muzzle lined with age and violence. Sylvie stopped, one hand raised, not in challenge, but in plea. Behind the alpha, Ira emerged. Her coat, ghost pale. Her eyes, not wild, not tame, but something else entirely. She didn't growl. She didn't advance. She watched. And Sylvie kept walking. Her boots cracked dry twigs. Her breath fogged in the air. Her fingers twitched near her coat pocket, where no weapon lay. She hadn't brought one. The alpha growled again. Ira stepped sideways. Slowly. Deliberately. Placing herself between Sylvie and the pack. The growl died in the alpha's throat. For one breathless moment, the forest held still. Sylvie dropped to her knees beside the foal. He flinched. Tried to rise, legs skidding on ash. She whispered low, almost inaudible. "I'm here. I've got you." The alpha didn't move. But he didn't retreat either. A cold wind blew through the clearing. Dust curled in silent spirals. Sylvie met his eyes, yellow, ancient, full of storms. He stepped forward. Sylvie's heartbeat crashed against her ribs. She stood, shielding the foal. Her hands empty. Her voice a whisper. "Please." Then Ira barked. Short. Sharp. A sound meant for ears beyond human. The alpha paused. Another step. Ira moved in front of him. Her ears pinned back, not in aggression, but insistence. Her body low, tail sweeping. Not a challenge. A message. The alpha exhaled through his nose. A long, dark breath. Then, he turned. Walked away. The rest of the pack followed. Reluctant. Confused. But obedient. Only Ira remained. Sylvie fell to her knees again. Her breath caught. Her body trembling. Ira sat. 10 feet away. Their eyes met. And something moved between them, not sound, not thought. Recognition. Not of species, but of story. Two creatures who had been broken differently and found each other in the wreckage. Sylvie didn't cry. Not yet. Time blurred. The foal shivered. Sylvie removed her coat, laid it over him. Her fingers brushed his flank. He didn't pull away. A breath. A pause. Then, he leaned, barely perceptible, into her touch. Oren. She didn't know his name. But it came to her, unspoken. Like it had always been there. Oren. Sylvie's throat tightened. She had once whispered another name into another child's ear. And lost it in the cold. Now, this trembling creature had filled that hollow, not replaced, not erased, but echoed. Ira hadn't moved. Sylvie leaned closer, her voice barely air. "You're not alone." The foal's ear flicked. From the tree line, the wind sighed. Not threat. Just presence. Sylvie looked at Ira. "Why are you still here?" Ira tilted her head. Her eyes, amber and unwavering. "Because you are," they seemed to say. Sylvie thought it was over. The danger had passed. The wolf's gone. She was wrong. A sound. Low. Wrong. From behind the tree line, something moved. Not wolves. A shadow. Heavy. Hunting. Ira stood. Her body stiffened. Then, she growled. A warning. The rest of the Shadowmoor pack reappeared. Quiet. Precise. Forming a loose semicircle around Sylvie and the foal. Orin whimpered. Sylvie's body coiled, ready to shield, to run, to fight with bare hands if needed. But the wolves weren't circling them. They were protecting. Sylvie turned and saw it. A cougar. Massive. Starving. Eyes sunken. Crouched on a fallen log. It hissed, but didn't leap. The alpha stepped forward. So did Ira. Then two more wolves. They didn't attack. They surrounded. The cougar snarled. One paw stepped back. A standoff. Then, the cat turned. Vanished into the woods. Sylvie exhaled. The wolves didn't follow. They returned to the ring. Saturday. Waiting. Not for prey. Not for threat. For peace. Sylvie looked at each one. Then at Ira. You brought them back. To protect us. The white wolf didn't move. Didn't need to. The truth was already in her eyes. Orin stirred. Sylvie stroked his neck. The wind carried the sound of water nearby. A place to rest. To recover. She looked at the wolves. They looked back. And together, they began to move. Towards safety. Towards something new. Not quite wild. Not quite human. But something in between. It came with no warning. A roar, deep, guttural, rolling across the ridgeline like a wave of thunder grinding against the mountains. Sylvie's hand instinctively flew to Orin's withers. He stiffened. The sound didn't belong to the wolves. Nor the wind. It was heavier. Hungrier. Out of the undergrowth, a mountain lion emerged. Tawny. Massive. Scarred across the flank. Its eyes burned with a starvation that wasn't just hunger, it was desperation. For a moment, the beast stood still, every muscle taut, every breath shallow, as if gauging the risk. Ira was the first to react. No hesitation. No command. She lunged. Behind her, the alpha gave a warning bark, sharp and guttural. The sound echoed across the clearing like a battle cry. A younger wolf, not more than a yearling, his legs still awkward with youth, dashed forward beside them, a reckless streak of gray and fire. 3 wolves against 1 cat. Sylvie froze, caught between awe and terror, unsure if this was a rescue or a last stand. The cougar snarled, its tail twitching like a fuse about to light. It lunged for Orin. Ira intercepted midair, her body a flash of white fury slamming into tan muscle. The 2 beasts collided with the force of a storm. Fur flew. Teeth snapped. Claws raked against ribs. Blood spattered across the trampled grass. The alpha didn't leap. He circled wide, his eyes never leaving the cougar. He wasn't reckless, he was waiting for the opening. The yearling darted in and out, feinting like a boxer, his inexperience made up for by his speed. Orin cried out, scrambling backward. Sylvie dropped to her knees, pulling the foal behind her, shielding his body with her own. The cougar reared, snarling, but the alpha lunged, jaws clamping around the predator's hind leg. The cat twisted, shrieking, and struck blindly. Its claws opened a line along Ira's shoulder, red and raw. But Ira didn't stop. She bit down. The cougar screamed, not a growl, not a roar, a scream of frustration and pain. It kicked free, swiped once more, and then fled. Crashing through the underbrush, vanishing into the fire-scarred forest like a ghost exiled by its own hunger. Silence returned. Violent. Still. Ira limped. The alpha panted, blood trailing from his lip. And the yearling, tail high, tongue lolling, looked back at Sylvie like a child proud of passing his first test. Sylvie knelt beside Oren, wrapping her arms around him. Her breath trembled. She didn't speak to the wolves. She didn't thank them. She didn't need to. She whispered, not to calm him, but herself. That wasn't instinct, she breathed. That was choice. A wind passed through the clearing. It didn't howl. It didn't roar. It carried something else. An understanding. Night fell early in the fire-scarred woods. Smoke still clung to the trees like old ghosts that refused to leave. Sylvie, Oren, and the wolves traveled in silence. Ira led the way, her white coat a pale ghost ahead. The rest of the Shadowmoor pack followed, never once brushing too close, but never straying too far. It was not a hunt. It was an escort. Sylvie carried Oren for a time, cradled against her chest, his legs tucked beneath him. His breathing was slow, but steady. The wolves adjusted their pace to hers. No growls. No hierarchy displays. Just presence. Branches creaked under the weight of rain. Some were deep in the forest. An owl cried once, then stopped. It was as if the entire forest held its breath, not from fear, but from reverence. Around midnight, they stopped near a glade where the earth was still warm. Ira nosed a patch of moss and lay down, curling around herself. Others followed, one by one, some pressed close, others at a distance. Sylvie sat near the edge, Oren curled beside her, his tiny body trembling with exhaustion. She didn't sleep. She stared at the stars through the broken canopy, one hand resting on the foal's back, the other clutching the old field notebook she hadn't opened in years. Pages yellowed. Edges torn. But tonight, she felt an urge to write. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she listened to the breath of wolves, to the quiet shift of hooves and dreams. She wondered. Why? Why her? Why this? And as she watched the slow rise and fall of Ira's chest, a thought occurred to her. What if this wasn't random? What if the wolves weren't acting as wild animals, but as messengers? She didn't speak the thought aloud. Because some truths aren't spoken. They're lived. By dawn, they found them. The Mustangs. Bran. Lyra. The herd, grazing warily in a clearing ringed with burned trees. Oren raised his head. A sharp, instinctive cry burst from his lungs. Lyra turned. The moment was instant. She broke into a run, whinnying, crashing through the frostbitten brush. Sylvie lowered Oren. He ran. Stumbled. Got up. Kept going. Lyra met him halfway, snorting, circling, nuzzling every inch of him. The reunion was pure, unfiltered, as if life had paused to witness it. Then, the mood shifted. Lyra lifted her head. Stiffened. Her nostrils flared. She smelled wolf. She turned toward Sylvie. 1 step back. 2. Bran approached, slowly, massive, protective. The entire herd stirred, agitated. Hoofs pawed the ground. Tails flicked in nervous rhythm. Sylvie stood still. Her palms out. Her face calm. But inside, her heart collapsed. Because for the first time, she was being rejected by both worlds. Not wolf. Not horse. Nothing. Ira padded up behind her. Close, but not touching. Sylvie whispered, "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" The wind answered. But no one else did. Orin looked back, just once. But even he, in his innocence, could not bridge the chasm Scent had carved. That night, the sky cracked open. Rain fell in sheets. The mountains groaned. The river swelled. Sylvie huddled under a pine, Orin sleeping beside her. Ira hadn't left. Nor had the pack. They rested like shadows carved into the hillside, unmoving, but ever watchful. Lightning forked through the heavens. Then, in the darkness, a flash of white. Ira. She stood at the edge of the trees. Eyes locked on Sylvie. Tail still. Then she turned. And barked. Once. Then again. Sylvie grabbed her gear. Scooped Orin into a sling. And followed. The path was steep. Muddy. Dangerous. Ira moved with urgency. Sylvie's breath caught with every step. Rocks slipped beneath her boots. She fell once. Twice. But she rose. Every time. They reached a ridgeline. Below, a disaster. The herd. Trapped. On a ledge half washed away by landslide. Rocks shifted. Hoofs slipped. One wrong move, and they'd fall into the gorge below. Sylvie stared. Frozen. Then Ira barked again. Sharper. Commanding. The wolves moved. Not attacking. Positioning. One darted left, flanking the ridge. Another darted right, cutting off retreat. Ira turned to Sylvie. And stared. A message. Help them. Sylvie moved. She scrambled up the ridge, waving her coat, guiding, redirecting. She didn't think. She just acted. The wolves mirrored her. Where she pointed, they moved. It was choreography. Unspoken. Untaught. Wild. The stallion finally understood. Bran reared once, then bolted. The herd followed. One by one, the Mustangs climbed to safety, guided by a woman, shadowed by wolves. Orin stood beside Sylvie at the summit. Wet. Trembling. Alive. Lyra approached again. This time, she did not back away. She nuzzled Sylvie's hand. And when the storm passed, and the valley bathed in golden light, Sylvie looked at Ira. They had crossed a line that didn't exist anymore. Predator and prey. Human and animal. Science and soul. This wasn't observation. It was a covenant. And it would echo in the wild longer than any name. The cabin was quiet. Not silent, for there was always sound in the Shale Ridge, but quiet in a way that settled into the bones. The kind of quiet that made you breathe softer. The kind that asked you to listen without your ears. Sylvie stood at the window, fingers curled around a ceramic mug, steam rising in gentle swirls. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on the valley below. And what she saw shouldn't have been possible. On the far slope, bathed in early morning light, the Mustangs grazed. Their coats glinted like moving bronze. Among them, Orin trotted, stronger now, the white star on his forehead catching every sunbeam like a crown. A few yards away, unmoving, sat the wolves. Ira at the center. The alpha on her right. The yearling on her left. None crouched. None stalked. They watched, heads high, ears forward. They watched the horses. And did nothing. No predator. No prey. Just presence. For over an hour, Sylvie stood there. She thought of everything that had brought them to this moment, 1,000 fractures mended by one impossible truth, that coexistence wasn't only possible. It was already happening. At some point, the wind shifted. A pine branch scratched against the window. She blinked. And finally moved. At her desk lay a blank page. Not a report. Not a spreadsheet. Not the neat rows of Latin genus or territorial maps. A white page. And a pen. She wrote the title first, Field Notes of the Unprovable. Then a subtitle, slower, What I Witnessed When the World Forgot Its Place. No numbers followed. Only feeling. Only the truth. Her handwriting trembled with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope? The words didn't stop. For hours, Sylvie wrote. Paragraphs came like waves, sometimes rough, crashing, sometimes a whisper that pulled her under. She didn't revise. Didn't pause. Just let it bleed onto the page. Until it came back. The memory she never let herself write. He had been 5. Blonde curls. A laugh like spring water. His name was Micah. Her son. The day it happened, she had taken him along for a field study, a mistake she had rationalized with all the arrogance of someone who thought knowledge insulated her from consequence. A mudslide. A trail that gave way. A scream too short. And silence that lasted years. The world had called it an accident. She had called it murder. Her own. And now, this foal. This fragile-legged, ash-marked spirit named Orin. She didn't save him for research. She didn't save him for redemption. She saved him because, for the first time, something reached into the grave she had buried inside her and asked her not to lie in it anymore. She pressed her fingers to the paper, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I forgive you," to herself. For the first time, she remembered Micah's hands, always full of dirt or feathers or questions. The way he'd pointed at the stars and asked, "Do wolves go there when they die?" Maybe now, she thought, she had the answer. Not where, but how they remained. The knock didn't come from the door. It came from the earth. A soft crunch outside the window. The slow rhythm of pause. Sylvie opened the cabin door before she even realized what she was doing. There, on the edge of the clearing, stood Ira. She didn't move. Didn't blink. She simply looked. Sylvie stepped outside. The wolf didn't flinch. Her ears forward. Her breath slow. Her tail still. Her eyes, those deep amber wells, did not ask for anything. They offered something. Connection. Recognition. A kind of ancient mirror, as if to say, I know what you've lost. And I still see you. Sylvie sat down, slowly, on the cabin's step. They were now almost eye level. Ira tilted her head. And then, she approached. One slow step. Then another. Until she was close enough that Sylvie could hear her breathing, steady, measured, not a predator's breath, but something older, quieter. Ira lowered her head. Touched her nose to Sylvie's knee. Just once. And in that touch, Sylvie felt something she hadn't in years. Belonging. When Ira finally turned and faded into the trees like a memory made flesh, Sylvie did not feel abandoned. She felt seen. And something in her healed. The auditorium was too bright. Sylvie stood behind a sleek glass podium, clutching a remote she didn't intend to use. Behind her, a large screen showed the title, Behavioral Anomalies in Predatory Species, a case from the Shale Ridge. Beside it, nothing. No graphs. No footage. Just a photo. One she took that morning, a foal grazing. A wolf sitting. Nothing in between. The silence in the room was clinical. Curious. Expectant. Sylvie looked at the audience. Faces of scholars. Doubt already forming in their brows. She began. I'm not here to defend a hypothesis. I'm not here to cite ratios of cortisol or migratory shifts due to post-fire vegetation loss. I'm here to tell you a story. A murmur. Some raised eyebrows. She continued. She spoke of wolves who watched. Horses who didn't run. A woman who didn't take notes. A choice made in silence. A foal saved not by instinct, but intercession. She told them of Ira. Of Oren. Of a forest that rewrote the rules. She didn't use academic language. She used human language. And when she reached the end, the room did not applaud. It held its breath. Until a single hand rose. A gray-haired man with half-moon glasses. Are you saying, he asked slowly, that we've been studying animals as a species, when we should have been studying them as souls? Sylvie smiled. Not with triumph. With truth. Yes, she said. Exactly that. Time passed, as it does in the wild, not in minutes, but in migrations. The forest healed, but not as it was. Different. Better. Oren grew. The gangly legs strengthened. The white star on his brow became legend. Rangers spotted him flanked by wolves, not as prey, not as kin, but as bridge. The one who had crossed. He led small groups through forest paths, unafraid. Sometimes toward the herd. Sometimes toward the clearing where Sylvie waited. She returned to her cabin, not as an exile, but as a guardian. Visitors came. Some left gifts at her steps. Others left only questions. Some cried, just looking at the photo she kept by the window, of a white wolf and a chestnut foal, side by side. Ira came too. Less often, but always at dawn. Sometimes, she and Sylvie sat in silence. Nothing said. Everything understood. And sometimes, Brand would watch from the ridge, unmoving, his mane catching the wind like a banner that no longer needed to wave. Mustangs. Wolves. A woman with old scars and new eyes. They didn't speak the same language. They didn't need to. Because in that valley, something had shifted. Not power. Not place. But perception. And one morning, as the sun painted the trees gold, Sylvie whispered to the wind. We never tamed them. We listened. And the forest listened back. The air inside the cabin was filled with quiet scratching, the sound of pen against paper. Sylvie's hand moved with calm conviction. Her desk was covered in rough notes, old field maps, weather-stained journals. But at the center of it all was something new. A manuscript. Its title, The Pact Without Words. She wasn't writing a scientific paper. Not this time. She wasn't citing observational behavior or ecosystem response curves. What she was doing now was remembering, honoring, translating soul into story. In the margins of her notes, she wrote things like, some instincts are learned. Others are unlearned. The eyes of a wolf can teach a man more than any microscope. Silence is the language of trust. Each chapter captured a moment that science had failed to predict, the standing still, the not attacking, the returning of a foal to its mother, not by a ranger, but by a wolf. The night a predator howled not to hunt, but to call for help. And Sylvie's words didn't argue for understanding. They invited it. She no longer feared the disbelief of her peers. She feared only silence in the face of wonder. The cabin was dim, lit by soft lamplight. Outside, the snow whispered down in slow spirals. Inside, the pages multiplied, soaked with meaning, with memory, with a truth deeper than taxonomy. She paused once, gazing out the window at the clearing below. Orange stood near the tree lean, his mane rippling with quiet defiance. Ira not far behind. They were doing nothing remarkable. Just existing. Just sharing space. And yet, it was everything. Sylvie whispered, to no one, to everyone. You are all trying to speak. We just never listened. And this time, she believed it could be different. The first snow came early. By midnight, the ridge was powdered in white, like ash reborn. The forest held its breath, as it always did when the world reset. Sylvie sat by the fire. A cup of tea in hand. No music. Just the pop of wood and the quiet hum of something she could only call peace. The room smelled of pine and paper. Her manuscript sat nearby, half bound with twine, pages slightly curled from the warmth of the flames. Outside, the storm softened everything, the trees, the trails, the weight of memory. Then, a sound. Not a knock. Not a howl. A presence. She opened the door. No one. Only paw prints. Leading away from the porch. Deep, deliberate, unmistakable. Ira. The shape of her feet was burned into Sylvie's memory, not just because of their frequency, but because of what they represented. Every step was a gesture. Every print, a wordless vow. Sylvie stepped out, barefoot, letting the snow bite. It was cold, sharp, and alive. The prints didn't meander. They moved with intent. Across the clearing. Toward the trail. Then disappeared into the dark. Sylvie didn't follow. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, she understood. Some thank yous don't need words. Some bonds are so complete, so sacred, that the only language left is presence. She closed her eyes. Let the night wrap around her like a prayer. And whispered, I saw it. All of it. Thank you. No wind answered. No voice returned. But the quiet itself seemed fuller, like something had heard. Like something had waited to be acknowledged. Spring came in whispers. Not with fanfare, but with moments. The first thaw. The first shoot of green through ash. The day Sylvie opened her window and didn't smell smoke or frost, but earth. One morning, she stood again on her cabin steps. Tea warm this time. Sunlight caught the mist over the valley. Everything shimmered, as if the world had forgiven itself overnight. From the ridge, she saw them. Orrin, now fully grown, proud, strong, his white star bright like an echo of something divine. Around him, mustangs grazed, unhurried. And among the trees, the silent shapes of wolves watched. Not stalking, not guarding, just witnessing. There was no fear, no distrust, only knowing. Ira emerged from the woods. She didn't come forward. She just stood there. As if this was enough. As if this was the ceremony. Sylvie stood, eyes full. Not of tears, but of the kind of clarity that only comes after years of ache. And behind her, others stepped onto the porch. Students. Filmmakers. A child with her hand clutched to her father's sleeve. A reporter who thought he'd come for a scoop and left with silence instead. All watching what should never have been possible. And yet, here it was. Wolves. Horses. A woman. All breathing the same breath. The same truth. Sylvie opened her notebook. Wrote one last line. If a Mustang soul can make a human weep, then perhaps compassion has never known the limits of species. And as she closed the book, she felt it. The covenant had not ended. It had only just begun. Not all salvation comes from humankind. Not every instinct is eternal. And sometimes, the thread holding the world together is a soul that chose not to bite, not to flee, but to stay, and look into our eyes with quiet understanding. Let this be a reminder that somewhere in the wild, something sacred still breathes. And it is waiting for us to be silent enough to finally hear it. If this story moved something in you, if a part of you paused, breathed deeper, and felt the presence of something wordless, then don't let it stay with you alone. Leave us a comment below. Tell us what touched you most. Share this story with someone who needs to believe again. Like the video if your heart stirred even once. And subscribe to Gallop of Glory, because the next story might be the one that changes everything you thought you knew. Until next time, stay wild. Stay listening. Stay kind. The team at Gallop of Glory.